meeting is being recorded.
Hello, I'm Adriana, the Program Manager of Children, Youth, and Family Programs for AboutFace. Welcome to our webinar, Employment Advocacy. We'd like to start off with the land acknowledgement. Each of us is joining the webinar today from a different location and therefore a different Indigenous land. I wish to acknowledge the land on which AboutFace is headquartered, which is in the city of Toronto. This land is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this webinar place is still the home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on the land. We hope that after today's session, you'll take a moment to learn more about the land that you occupy. If you've never been on a Zoom webinar before, we'll explain a couple of things. Only the panelists and the hosts will be visible on the screen. You, the participants, will not have video access, but can participate using the chat and the Q&A options at the bottom of your screen. Please use the Q&A for all of your questions. The chat will be used for you to participate in the webinar. Questions may get lost in the chat, so we do advise that all questions that you'd like answered be placed in the Q&A. We'll also do our best to answer any questions that throughout the webinar you might have. However, we may be limited with time. One last thing to note before we start, we cannot provide any specific advice or counseling. So if you do have any questions that might be considered this, we'll direct you to ask your healthcare team. Today's webinar will focus on gaps in employment opportunities for those with a facial difference. We will discuss what employment advocacy in the workplace looks like and touch on some personal stories and experiences of our panelists. Led by Colleen Wheatley and our panelists, this webinar will focus on asking questions and hearing from the community members about their experience with advocacy in the workplace. With that, I'm going to pass it off to Colleen, who will get us started on the webinar. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Adriana. Welcome to everyone who's taking the time to either attend this webinar or take the time to watch it later on and watch the recording. As Adriana mentioned, we will be discussing lots of different experiences, some of our own personal experiences, some that we've shared from other community members as well. And so these are some of our own personal opinions and experiences. And we also just want to let people know we all have, within the facial difference community, we all have diverse experiences ourselves as well. So it might not be exactly the same way for everybody else. And just for a reminder that there are other resources for folks to share if you want to do your own research. And AboutFace is actually currently working on, we do have an employment campaign and we do have employment resources, and those are available on our website. So with that, I'm going to do some quick introductions. So we are very lucky to have two fantastic panelists here joining our conversations about employment and experiences for folks in the facial difference community. So I'll start myself. I'm Colleen Wheatley. I'm located in Guelph area, just outside of Toronto in Canada. My pronouns are she, her. For myself, my facial difference experience, I was born or close enough to being born with a infantile hemangioma. So I feel like, you know, these days when sometimes I'm the only one wearing a mask in a room, I've been training for this, like since I was a toddler, of having a noticeable difference of folks around me. And then part of the reason some things I will speak to in this webinar are also professionally. My background is I am a social worker. I have worked for AboutFace in the past, various nonprofits, and currently I am working for a school board. So that's just a little bit, and you'll hear more later on. And now I will pass it over to Karen.
Thanks, Colleen. Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Heineman. My pronouns are she, her. I am located in Ottawa, the capital of Canada. So my connection to the facial difference community is that I was born with hemihypertrophy. So that is something that affects my whole body, not just my face, but one side is bigger than the other throughout. I got a little funky and switched sides partway through, but I have remained a medical mystery. So I do have a lot of experience, obviously, with being part of the facial difference community. I've been involved with AboutFace, I'm not even sure how many years. I'm going to say probably a good 15, 17 years that I've helped out here and there where I can, especially when there's events in Ottawa and they need a representative. But I also have a lot of experience in the workforce. I am a paralegal with the Department of Justice right now. Before joining the government, I spent 17 years working for private law firms. So I've had an opportunity to work in a lot of different environments and go from being a legal assistant fresh out of college at 19 to being a paralegal now, and I've had a few opportunities to be a paralegal supervisor and get a lot of different experiences. So hopefully I can share some of that with you.
Thanks so much, Karen. And now I'm going to pass it over to Ross.
Thanks, Colleen. My name's Ross Peel. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm located in Kincardine, Ontario. And my facial difference that I was born with is a cleft lip and palate. And I'm currently working as a project control junior planner with Connectrix, with experience in the grocery department and heat treatment and manufacturing.
Thanks so much. So one of the things we want to talk about is why are we talking about employment in the facial difference community? And one of the reasons is, according to a survey that was done with community members, approximately 60% of us identified that we have been negatively impacted in the workplace because of our facial difference. Some of these key findings, if we narrowed down, was people experienced a lack of opportunities or career progression. Over a third of people experienced bullying and harassment. And I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge, because there seems to be this idea that like bullying is something that only kids in elementary school experience, and where it's like, well, when you're in elementary school, go tell the teacher. And also, I hear from lots of different folks in the community as well that it's not actually quite that simple to deal with. Teasing, bullying, all of those things. But I think it's really, sometimes it's almost forgotten that this is something that we as adults can experience in our workplace as well. And half of us experienced staring or gaping from coworkers. And so this is something, when we think about how much time some of us spend in the workplace, that these are experiences that we're having. And it could be when we're newer at a job, or sometimes it's also where we've been in that job for quite some time. So really just acknowledging that this is something that does affect a lot of community members out there. And so that's why it's been seen as something that is important. There is a gap for folks in the facial difference community. We are not currently protected by the human rights codes. And so that can really be a gap and make it challenging. I know some of our conversations, both in this panel and preparing for this webinar, and ones I've had with other community members, it can be very challenging to kind of identify and articulate, right? Where it's like, well, I don't know, if I didn't get a job because of my facial difference, I might not necessarily even know that as well. So it can be very challenging to identify. And this is why AboutFace is really taking some time to explore this and look at what we can do to support ourselves and each other as a community. So really, I guess I kind of touched on my thoughts, but I'm going to put this out to the panelists as well. Why do we think that the AboutFace employment campaign is necessary? So if I can put you on the spot, Ross, would I be able to pick your brain on why do you think that the employment campaign is appropriate these days?
Yeah, I definitely personally, I feel like these resources that AboutFace is providing, like if at a younger age, for sure, like if it was offered to me, it would have been tremendously helpful. I was in my early 20s, in my teenage years, like it was a difficult time. So these resources were never available, or they may have been available, but they were very hard to find, and I could not find them. So that is like the key one that I really kind of lean on. But a person with a facial difference also may feel alone, and this campaign I feel like could give them a voice. And this campaign will give people an opportunity to share career success stories, and this could build self-esteem and allow someone to reach their full potential. And that's kind of, those are why I think the campaign is necessary.
Yeah,
Well,
I
you covered a lot of
definitely,
great points.
I definitely agree with you, Ross. Certainly helping to share our successes is going to help other people who are, maybe just entering the workforce to see what their opportunities could be, or more along the lines of see that any opportunity could be available to them, that they don't need to hold themselves back. We don't need to hide off in the sidelines. I also think it's important to have this campaign because employers need to have a better understanding. So yes, I think it's definitely a helpful campaign to support people in the facial difference community. But I think there's also a need to raise awareness with employers, make them aware of some of the things that they may not realize. A lot of employers, well, frankly, people in general have biases. They don't realize that they do. They all want to say, we all do. We all want to say that we don't have these biases against anyone, but in actuality, everyone does. It's human nature, but it's about recognizing them. And maybe there's some strengths that we all have from dealing with life with our facial differences that might open some eyes for the employers, and maybe start looking at people from a slightly different perspective.
Absolutely. And I mean, you touched on, we've got this great photo of Christine, one of our community members, talking about that HR and that unconscious bias. And I think that can be a very challenging thing to really identify and articulate, both in the workplace and in our own lives. I know that I'm not the only one who has ever experienced, well, maybe you're just being too hypersensitive, or maybe you're looking for issues, right? Or just like, well, just don't worry about it. Just don't worry about what other people think. And the reality is, like, well, if it was that easy, then we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? So really acknowledging those things. I know for myself, and I mean, when I think about, I'm a social worker, right? Would I be a social, which has definitely, my career path has definitely been impacted by having a facial difference, right? I went into a helping professional because that felt safe to me, right? I knew that I would be working with other people who are working to help other folks. I rarely applied to jobs where it was kind of frontline, whether it was serving or front of house, all of those things, because that was something that I didn't see myself there. So I know that was something that kind of guided my path as time went on, and whether it was kind of my own, it took me a little while to reflect, like, well, why aren't I applying to those serving jobs? And it was because I didn't believe I would be hired. I eventually did. I'm pretty good at making some good lattes, those sorts of things. But sometimes even just seeing that there are other people, and Ross, you talked about that as well, when we're younger, seeing that, there's people in business, entrepreneurs, all of those different things. And maybe if I had seen more people who looked like me when I was younger, I can't imagine doing anything other than social work right now, but I don't know. Would my path have changed if I had had a different experience when I was young?
Yeah, for sure. And I do want to make a point that, like, I personally have never felt like going to a job interview or trying to apply for another position. I never thought to myself, oh, if I didn't get a certain job, I would never go, oh, I didn't get this job because of the way I look. I always look at it as I didn't work hard enough. I didn't do the interview well enough. But I do feel like even if an employee has never, like, not hired someone because of their facial difference, I still feel like the campaign is necessary, because we do need to focus on, like, improving self-esteem in younger adults and children, and people that are suffering with facial differences, they need these resources to help them with self-esteem and improving their soft skills in those areas.
Absolutely. And I think both you and Karen touched on it too, where it's kind of creating that environment of safety, right? So a lot of policies and procedures are really reactive of, well, what do we do when this negative thing comes up? And so really by even including these conversations in hiring processes, in recruitment, all of those things, that's actually going to widen the people who might apply, as well as it is really creating that sense of safety as opposed to dealing with a reaction. Now putting it out to the panel again. So the first question, this is kind of a two-part question, but can you describe a time when you have had to advocate for yourself in the workplace? And maybe I'll switch it up and I'll ask Karen first, and then I'll go to you, Ross.
Thanks, Colleen. So I've been very fortunate in my career that I haven't really had to advocate for myself in my job a whole lot. But I did recently, I applied for a volunteer position in the government to work on an equity, diversity, and inclusion steering committee. And this was something that was put out to everybody in our sector. And so there was many people across the country who were applying for this, and only a select few were being chosen. So I needed to put it out there of why I am the person for the job. And, I had to put out there that I am part of the facial difference community. They're looking at this in writing. They're not seeing my picture. They don't know this. But, I explained in my application why I think I'm the right person to be added to this committee and what I bring to the table. And honestly, what I bring to the table is hard work and experience in the workforce, but also experience being part of the facial difference community. And that comes with obstacles, right? We've all, as you mentioned earlier, Colleen, we've all dealt with the teasing back in the 70s growing up. That was what it was called. It was never called bullying. But now it's recognized for what it actually is. And, this does continue. It's something we all deal with throughout our entire life. So, I think it's good to put yourself out there, try new things like this. And, I got approved to be appointed to this committee. So I take that as a win, and it's an opportunity for me to share my experiences and help to try to develop change in my department to improve things for people who are dealing with facial differences or any other difference going forward. How do I remain resilient in the workplace or while seeking employment? For me, one of the things is that, when I'm looking for a job, and I've had to do this, I've literally pounded the pavement and walked around and handed out resumes before, email really took over the world. But back in the early 90s, that's how we would do it. And do you get every job you apply for? No. But honestly, if someone didn't hire me because of the way I look, I, like Ross said earlier, don't know about it. But also, if that's a reason why somebody didn't hire me, I don't want to work with them. And I think that's a big thing that we all have to remember when we're applying for jobs. You want to work in an environment that's going to support you, and a company or, sole practitioner, employment, wherever, if they don't hire you because of the way you look, you don't want to work with them. They're not going to support you now in hiring you. They're not going to support you later.
That's really great insight and things that I've heard from other folks in the community as well, of how important it is finding that safe place where you feel good. And I know things can be very challenging, but also recognizing that we deserve to feel safe. And possibly even like celebrated. That's an ideal workplace. I mean, not every day, but somewhere where we get to celebrate some of our successes as well. Can I pass the question over to you now, Ross, about a time you've advocated for yourself in the workplace?
Yeah, there's been quite a few examples. It was really difficult for me to like pick a particular one, but one that kind of stood out to me was when I was transitioning into a new job. I had been working in the grocery business for about 5 years at this point, and I wanted to transition into a manufacturing job. So when I gave my 2 weeks notice to my boss at the grocery job that I was working at, everything seemed fine. It was very normal. It wasn't the first time I gave my 2 weeks, so I kind of understood how the whole process went down. You just kind of write a note, write the date that you're the last day you're going to be available, and just sign it, and just have a verbal and written agreement, and then everything seemed fine. And then a week passed, and my boss came up to me while I was working, and he said that he wanted me to work an extra 2 weeks because the person that was taking over for me was going on holidays. And I knew I was putting him in a tough spot, but because I already had my other job lined up, I had to decline it because I just didn't want to jeopardize my new job. Unfortunately, my boss did not take that news very well, and he said that he would give me a bad reference if I didn't stay the extra 2 weeks. And I was very taken back by the response, as you could understand. But I didn't really know what to say, and I just responded by saying, I don't think you can do that. And he responded, I can, because I'm the boss. And I just kind of walked out of the office to diffuse the situation. But for the rest of my shift, he continued to berate me to reconsider. Like, he kept asking me over and over, like, hey, I need you to work these 2 weeks. And it was at like 5 hours left in the shift, and he just kept asking every time he saw me. But I just kept declining, and he would just say, oh, you're not a team player. And then when my shift was finally over, I just called the union that was representing me at the time and asked them for help. And a couple days after, that same manager that was berating me had to apologize, but he said he was just joking. But I told him it didn't matter if he was joking or not, that he was trying to manipulate me and saying yes. But yeah, it's not a good situation, but I think I handled it the best way I could have, and I'm proud that I kind of did the proper steps at that time.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate that example because I can see a lot of folks going through that, right? Especially when we're new in the field, or also, it can be hard when we're transitioning, right? So, and I think you discussed a lot of things, how you responded personally, how you handled it in the moment, even kind of stepping back. And I think kind of when we think about advocacy, sometimes it's okay if we've got to step back first, right? And reflect on, wait a second, how am I going to handle this? Sometimes there are times, even, when I think about times where I've had to advocate for myself as well, where it's kind of, you know what, I'm going to step back. I'm maybe going to wait until tomorrow to send this email, right? I'm going to, really think about what my response is, and also reaching out to other departments. Sometimes it feels like, there's only that one person in front of us, but actually there's all sorts of, unions, HR departments, legal departments, all sorts of things. And I think it's really helpful to recognize that, lots of other people have these shared experiences as well. So sometimes it is reaching out to other colleagues, other folks as well. I know I find myself advocating, when I think about with my facial difference, it's that really getting included. I'm a social worker. We have lots of conversations about equity and inclusion. I cannot think of a time. I think I've heard of one minister that I've heard be interviewed on CBC where she has included facial differences in conversations around disability. As far as any other diversity conversation, I cannot think of when somebody else in the room included facial differences. So it's always kind of been that person. And I'll be honest, there have also been times where I didn't have the energy. And so I didn't advocate. I think right now I'm getting back, I do see that as part of my role. And I'm working on kind of being included in conversations at the school board I work with, being included. Myself, I do believe that a facial difference, I believe in the social construction of disability, where a lot of times there is that stigma that it's like, oh, if you're a person with a disability, that's a you problem. You have to deal with it. And that can be very isolating and alone and challenging. And the social model actually flips it around and is like, for people with disabilities, it's actually the society around us that needs to catch up, right? So if all of our houses were built accessibly from the beginning, or our offices, all of those things had wheelchair ramps, had mobility aids, all of those things, then there would be less of a challenge for people with disabilities. And that's the way I personally see having a facial difference as well. It does impact the way that other people interact with me. It doesn't mean that this is something that it's just a Colleen problem, but that I do recognize that there is still work to be done in the society around us. And a little bit, because I think it's important, employment, whether you're working somewhere that doesn't feel safe, or you're having some of these negative experiences, or maybe you're trying to find employment, it can be very challenging. So just kind of some things around remaining resilient in the workplace, or while seeking employment. I know for myself, sometimes it's also knowing that like things are temporary. I do have some control and ability, and if I'm not happy working somewhere, then I can find somewhere else. Doesn't happen overnight. It can still be challenging, but being aware. And then I'd like to also mention another tool in building resilience and kind of recognizing that, and that's self-compassion. And self-compassion is, in self-care, there's a bit of overlap. Sometimes people think it seems like, oh, it must be nice to be able to like take a long walk or have a bath. It must be nice, but actually self-care is actually an act of empowerment. And it's really a way so that we can take care of ourselves so we have more to give others. So it's actually more selfless than it is selfish. And we do have resources on self-compassion at AboutFace, but just to recognize, it involves 3 different steps. One is including mindfulness. So that is sitting with feelings, good, positive, recognizing how they impact us. The next is self-kindness. Sometimes if I'm not able to do it in the moment, I think about what I would say to a friend or what a loved one would say to me. And then the other piece, and this is what AboutFace has done for me so many times, is it's that feeling of connection to other people. And I absolutely rely on the facial difference community, just in knowing I'm not alone, connecting with other people with those shared experiences. So those are things I've used, and there are resources on the website. Was there anything else?
So Colleen, you mentioned the fact that sometimes you may not have advocated for yourself because sometimes you just don't have the energy. And, that's something that I think we all deal with. Everybody goes through ups and downs in their personal life and their professional life and in life in general. So, life is hard. Life with a facial difference comes with extra challenges because we are putting our face out there every day. COVID has allowed us to wear masks and hide a little bit, but that's not really how we want to go through life. We don't want to go through life hiding, but sometimes, we don't have the energy to advocate for ourselves, and that's okay. That's part of what this campaign is for, is so that we have to advocate for ourselves less on a day-to-day basis, because there is more awareness being brought out to the community. So I think that's one of the benefits of this program through AboutFace. But like you said, also rely on your support systems, your family, your friends, your coworkers that you are close with, because we all develop those relationships. You've got some coworkers that are like best friends. It's your work wife, work husband, work sister, whatever. And those people will help you get through when you don't have the energy and the strength to advocate for yourself. And the resources at AboutFace and the people at AboutFace are also part of that support. And I think that's what people need to remember.
Thanks. There's so many things you said that I really appreciate. And I think what I really like too is that reliance on other folks, right? When we don't have those strengths. And I've been taught, you know, that it's about the courage, right? The courage to get up again, the courage to ask for help, because strength is temporary and we do run out of it. And like you said, you listed a whole bunch of other options when we really, you know, need help, and that's okay, and that's normal, and actually it shows a lot of bravery to ask for help. And again, I think, Ross, you gave quite a few examples in your scenario too, where it's reaching out for others.
Yeah, and I forgot to answer your second part of the question. Sorry. So, how I remain resilient in the workplace when seeking employment, or just in general, I do webinars like this. Well, this isn't like a common thing for me, but I participate in like volunteer stuff with AboutFace and doing the Camp Trailblazers, and that's always a good time. And doing a lot of Big Brother Big Sister events locally, and just always striving to like improve my self-esteem and my soft skills, and this overall being a better employee, but even more importantly, just trying to be a better person is what I try to do.
I feel like that was just the perfect segue into our next topic of conversation, where you talked about, it was beautiful, you talked about things to maintain and build your resilience, and at the same time also like building your skills as an employee. So yeah, how can having a facial difference actually be an asset for an employer and be used as a strength? Either of you have some examples that you're able to share? I know, Karen, you've got some thoughts.
Oh, I have lots of thoughts. As the people I work with, I have an ability to talk to anyone about anything. So yes, I mean, I think the things that we face as individuals with facial differences have built a sense of character and a strength that often other people who don't have to deal with obstacles like this, they don't have that. And so I think employers need to look at how we got to where we are and recognize that we have incredible strength of character. We are very determined. We are very hardworking. Generally, we are people who want to do our best at everything. So I think, you know, employers need to recognize that. And, you know, I would like to see more employers look beyond a resume. So I was doing staffing at one point, and I was in a position where I was looking to hire people. And I believe it was for an internship. So, you know, unpaid, someone's going to come and work with us for a few weeks and get some experience. And on paper, we saw who, you know, looks like they're the best person for the job. One of our candidates was someone who was in a wheelchair, and we had an opportunity. I don't believe we actually hired her for the internship, but we kept her resume, and we decided at one point, you know, this is someone who has a lot to offer, and on paper may not look like they're going to be the best person for the job, but you know what? They've got a lot to offer, and we offer an environment that fits well with their disability. So let's give this person a chance. And this person ended up being an amazing employee, one of our strongest ones that we have. And that goes to show, to me anyways, that, you know, there's a responsibility for employers to, yes, they need to look at their bottom line and hire the best team, build the best team. But there is also an obligation, I think, morally, to help other people. And some sometimes that isn't necessarily going straight for the person who, based on their resume and experience, is going to be your slam dunk, your best bet. Give somebody a chance because they may need it, and it's experience that is going to help them progress in their career. So when you have that opportunity, I think it's important to give back to other people and let them have that. That's my own take on it. I'm thankful that I've had that opportunity to be on the staffing side of things and give someone else that chance. So yeah, I do think, you know, the challenges that we've faced since birth, or whatever happens to have caused a person's facial difference, I mean, some traumatic event, you know, they've built a lot of strength throughout their life, and it's going to be demonstrated in the work that they do.
Great, thanks so much. And I also kind of, when I think about some of the challenges I've experienced when seeking employment too, also your comment as well of that sometimes we might not get that first job, but they're going to hold on to our resume, right? I find that's something that I really try to remind myself to hold on to that resilience because it can be really challenging there. So I like that acknowledgement as well. Can I pass it over to you, Ross, for any of your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Karen hit it so well. I don't know if I can replicate anything close to that, but like definitely a character of a person with a facial difference, the character is undeniable. Like people with facial differences have so many operations, the recovery and everything. And personally, like also I feel like people with facial differences can be good team players. And I just kind of sprung up this thought now, but like personally, when I was going through the operations and braces and all that stuff to get everything looking okay and functioning properly, I had a lot of teams looking at me at a very young age. So always like surrounded by teams of doctors, orthodontists, like working on me. And so it kind of translates in a work environment. Like I need a team to work with to like progress. So I feel like when you have that kind of like pushed into you at a young age, you kind of, it's a normal thing to work with a team and know that working with a team, that's the best way to succeed. So I feel like that's my thought on it.
Well, yeah, and I think I mean, I know when we were planning this webinar, and I do really appreciate kind of working together, right? And that this is a team effort. We're bringing in different experiences, and it absolutely is way better than if it was just one of us working. And even, you know, for some of the things from the AboutFace side, it was things that other staff had been working on as well. So it is that team mentality as well. And I think you did bring up that really great example of many of us have grown up with lots of doctor's appointments, all of those pieces. So we kind of, you know, get that experience of being in a room with lots of different varying professions and opinions and all of those things, and learning to speak up and advocate. I know for myself, my experience volunteering with AboutFace as a child gave me tons of experience of, you know, knowing, seeing other folks problem solve during fundraisers, speaking to large crowds. All of those different sorts of things have really helped build, at least for me, help build my resume and my experience and my comfort in a lot of different settings. I don't work in a medical setting, but occasionally I have to consult or do all of those pieces. And I think that life experience has made that very helpful. And I think this is where can be a choice. So I know myself, I have found a lot of times when in interviews, again, this is because I've been involved with AboutFace for decades at this point. So it's always been on my resume, even since my like very early one. So it's been easy to come up. It also has been interesting to see. I have had interviewers ask maybe not so appropriate or even legal questions about my facial difference as well. So it's a little bit of where I'm interviewing them too. For me, one of my strategies was that I would bring up my experience as someone with a facial difference, and I would describe kind of the different skills, some of the assets that I believe I have benefited from having a facial difference. That was one of my strategies. Again, especially when working in a helping profession, it makes sense. And this is all up to other folks, right? Other folks are like, I'm not putting it on my resume. It does, you know, this is all, we all have a choice in these conversations. We have that power. So that's what works for me. Other people might have different strategies as well, but I think we spoke about a few different things. Karen?
Yeah, no, when you said that you actually raise it in your interviews, I can honestly say I never have. I mean, my face is in the interview, so there's no way around it. They can see it. I've been very fortunate over the years. No one's actually confronted me or asked me about it in an interview. But I do take the opportunities when they're presented to talk to coworkers about it, because I know, even if they haven't come out and asked, I know the questions are there, right? That's human nature. And I'm okay with that. As long as people are respectful about it, then it's fine. But I do find I've actually, just in the last few years, hit that point in my life where I am advocating much more for this community. I think I've just reached a comfort level with myself. And so I am much more comfortable putting myself out there. I'm now, you know, I went into the legal field because the work interested me. I didn't pursue being a lawyer because that was just never the path I wanted. I didn't want to be the face in the courtroom. And I suspect there's a lot of people in the facial difference community that feel the same way. We don't want the spotlight on us. And that's always how I've gone through my career. I kind of stayed in the background. And over the last 6 or 7 years, I've gotten into a group where I'm having the opportunities to be a supervisor and a mentor to other people. So sharing my experiences and my career path with them and helping them progress in theirs. But I've also found an opportunity to be, ironically, the face of our group more often. So I'm actually doing some teaching of different courses. I speak at different opportunities, whether it's meetings or, you know, team meetings or wherever, that I have these opportunities to do some presentations, which was not something I ever thought I'd be comfortable doing. Frankly, the first one that I did that I was really out of my comfort zone was representing AboutFace at a charity auction. So that kind of got me started. It was speaking to a room of about 300 people that I didn't know. So trial by fire. But now I'm much more comfortable with it, and I'm glad for these experiences. I think it's helping me become much more comfortable in my own skin and being much more comfortable putting my face out there and being a spokesperson. So, you know, it takes some of us time. We get to this stage at different points in our lives. Colleen, you were lucky. You were, you know, doing all this volunteer work with AboutFace early on, so you had those opportunities, frankly, as a child. I'm much later in life getting to that comfort zone, but I'm thankful that I feel like I'm there finally. And hopefully some others will get there sooner rather than later, but everybody will get there eventually in their own time.
And what a great example too of again, perfect, like similar but different experiences, different paths. And one thing that I heard just kind of as you were talking as well is the practice thing, right? Where it's like the more that we do advocate, the more that the easier it gets. So I find that really helpful as someone who occasionally is a bit of a slower learner, who it takes me a little bit of time to learn a skill where it's like really, really hard the first couple tries. And so remembering that things can get easier. And especially whereas now you're like, well, now I talk to tons of people and I do lots of presentations. That's something that I wouldn't have previously predicted as well. So I think just remembering that things do get easier over time is really helpful.
It gets easier and the opportunities present themselves. So I think that's one thing that we all need to remember to do is take the opportunities that are presented to us.
Yes, and it also gets easier with practice to recognize those opportunities as well.
Yes.
Absolutely. So thanks. And because I think it is so helpful to remember kind of all of the things that we are bringing as a community to others. I just wanted to also recognize, so reminding people of different resources. So facial differences in the workplace, which is both targeted for members of the facial difference community, but also to employers as well. And you will definitely see some faces that you will recognize after this webinar. And again, kind of how Ross mentioned, where it's like, well, there might have been some of these resources out there, but really a lot of these things do rely on word of mouth. I find lots of people, oh, I never really thought about facial differences that way, or that, I have conversations where people go, oh, I don't know if I know anyone with a facial difference. And like statistically, absolutely, we all know people with facial differences. So it's always helpful. We've got social media, so putting the word out there so that it can be seen by more employers as well as more members of the facial difference community would be really, really wonderful. And it, I believe, is in the chat. And all of these are on our website as well. So now we're wrapping up our webinar. I just wanted to put it out to Ross and Karen. Do you have any kind of last minute thoughts? This is the opportunity for anyone if you do want to put any questions in the chat, but last minute thoughts, whether it's something where maybe what we would tell ourselves back depending on where we are in our career path. I keep thinking, I'm like, well, I've made it in my career path, but also, 10 years ago, I didn't know I would end up here. So who knows where I'll end up in 10 years myself. But anything else you'd like to pass on to others?
Well, for me, I would just like to remind everybody, you've got one life, make the most of it. There is really nothing you can't do in your career. If you have a goal, a dream, go after it. The worst that can happen is it doesn't come true, but odds are if it doesn't, it wasn't the thing that was meant for you. So keep trying. If you apply for jobs and you don't get them, trust me, we've all had jobs that we don't get. And I think for the most part, it's worked in our favors that we didn't get those jobs. They weren't meant for us. So keep trying. You will get the right job. You will get the right team. You just need to keep trying.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to previous Colleen, and absolutely would have benefited from understanding. And it is so helpful to recognize, sometimes it might take 5 years to look back. I know with a mentor of mine who I'm lucky enough to have known since I was 16 we still keep in touch. I was like, I don't know what I've been doing. I was wasting my time in this other job. And she was like, no, Colleen, like you have built skills in this job, even if it doesn't perfectly transfer into the next. Like you have been learning and you have been adapting and you have been practicing. So you have been continued to develop your skills. Whatever you're doing, you're able to build those and put those on the next way. And sometimes it does take reminding ourselves, reminding others and each other as well.
I personally, I would just say that I always tell younger people if they like have a desire, have like a career path or have passion for something, that is everything. Like you can be you can be the smartest person in the world. If you don't have passion, you don't have anything. And I've really struggled. I am 34 and I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And I am running out of time. So
Or maybe you're figuring it out right now, right?
maybe, yeah. Let's hope. But yeah, what Karen said, I can't compete with that. Like she nailed it. So I'll just thank you, Colleen, for having me, and it was a great webinar.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate this team effort, building on all of our shared experience, because I mean, man, if you put together all of our resumes, we are ready for, I think, most of the jobs out there.
Yes, and Ross, you know, you're still figuring it out, but the fact is it takes time. And like Colleen said, all the experience you get along the way, it all adds up, it all counts, it's all transferable to wherever you find your passion.
Thanks so much. Really couldn't ask for co-panelists on this webinar. Thank you so much. And thanks for everyone who took the time to join and review this conversation with us.
Thank you so much to our panelists and to Colleen for hosting this webinar on employment advocacy. Your shared insight and personal experience have made a great impact on this webinar. There are no further questions from any of the attendees. Thank you for all those who were able to join. This webinar has been recorded and will be available at a later date on our YouTube channel. Thank you to everyone for joining us today.